record. All right, so let's go over SSH, and this is your secure shell, and this lets you remote connect. Now, one of the reasons why you're going to use this instead of Telnet, remember Telnet is not going to be secure. It's not going to be encrypted or whatnot, whereas SSH is. So this lets you remote type your commands into a computer as if you're right there at the console at the computer remotely, and in doing so, you can basically do everything you would do right here at the terminal, but on a whole nother computer without actually being at that computer. So this is great if you need to access a server from home, you don't want to drive back to work, or if you need to access a server across the world without having to fly all the way to China or to Japan or Singapore or wherever, etc., etc. I can literally go on Amazon Cloud, set up a server on there, then SSH into Singapore into my server and set it up from here if I want to. And I never even have to leave the room to do it or anything. I don't have to fly all the way over to Singapore to do it or anything. I don't have to even leave to do it. So I can set up servers all around the world and set up a whole world network that's all connected together if I use SSH and use some of these remote networking skills or whatnot. So this is really important. Very, very important indeed. All right. So let's look at how to do it. So one of the things you're going to do to install it would be say yum open SSH. Now, in the case here of it should be yum install. In the case of CentOS, it's already installed on this machine, so you already have this installed. But if you're on Red Hat, it wouldn't already be installed, and you would need to install it. And this is how you do it. You say open SSH. That is the name of the program that would have it, and this would install. I'm not connected to the internet, so I can't run the command, but that is what I would type. After it's installed, you can then turn it on. And you need to turn it on a couple ways. First of all, we need to turn it on so that every time we reboot the computer, the service is already running. We want that to always be running so that way we can access it remotely. If we don't have this set up and running, we can't access it remotely, right? Because then the server's not running, so therefore it can't receive any input from remote connection. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so that's important. So in order to set that up, in the case of CentOS, we have to give the full path name. In Red Hat, you don't have to, but in CentOS, you do. Of course, this command also works in Red Hat, so it doesn't really matter. But, hey. chk config, like so, space, and then we're going to say from here, of course it's sbin because this is a super user binary, meaning that this is a super user program to run, or the administrator's programs. No normal person could run this command. All the programs that only the administrator can run are in /sbin. So, and this is one of those. And this would be SSH, like that, and then space, and then on. Of course, probably need a D on there for Damon. Okay. Cool. We have something else going on here. Let me see if I can do service instead. And then tell it to start would be the next thing you do after that. Oh, yes. Huh. By the way, you also need to be root. That always helps. In our case, it's going to be password for password. Alright, now the commands will work. I was like, wow, why isn't it working? Never mind. I always do that. Alright, chk config. I'm going to leave that in there because other people are going to make this mistake. On. Already, sorry, left off the D. You're right. Alright, cool. Now it's on. We're going to do the same thing here, only I'm going to change it from chk config. So that right there, that SSHD right there with the on there with the chk config makes it come on when we reboot. So the moment we reboot the server or whatever, if we reboot the entire computer, this server is automatically going to launch. We don't have to turn it on or do anything. So it's great if you ever have to shut down your computer and not have to worry about turning on all the servers again and launch them again. They're automatically going to start up on their own. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, so it's just ideal. Alright, you're going to type these commands about 1 million times this quarter. These same ones I'm doing for this SSH is the same thing for all these servers, for turning them on and starting them. So you're going to use these for every single week, literally, for each server. Sometimes they do more than one server a week. So you're going to get very familiar with these commands. And again, /sbin and then /service here, sshd, and then start, because we're going to start the server. So the on told it that when we restart the computer, it's going to be coming up and running, and the start here with the service tells it to start it up right now. So that way we don't have to reboot the computer. Like in Windows, you have to reboot your computer in order to, after you install something and get it working, right? In Linux, you don't have to do that. In Linux, after you install it, you can just start it. And that's what we're doing. So literally, we did the yum space install space open SSH, and then right here we're doing the /sbin /server space sshd space start, and that actually started the server up right away. So very cool and very powerful. And that starts it up. All right, so that got SSH going. At this point, your SSH server is up and running. Ta-da. I'm not kidding you. From a server side, you're done. If you want, you could add users and stuff like this into the configuration file. Let me show you where that configuration file is. But essentially, you're up and running already. Really, SSH doesn't take much. But of course, it's going to be inside the etc folder, because that's where all your configuration files are on Linux. And we're going to be looking for SSH D here. Sorry, 1 second. We should be down in the S's here. Okay, yeah, SSH, about to say. Should be right there. Should be SSH. Alright, SSH, like so. CD into there, LS, check it out. And here's your different ones. This is your configuration file right here. So if I wanted to, I could cat this file, for instance, sshd_config, like so. And this would display what's in this file. And don't forget your grep, because remember, grep helps you find what you're looking for. It helps quite a bit, matter of fact. And you can change the amount of information that comes from your SSH, etc., what port it uses. Leave it at 22. Please don't mess with that. There's stuff you can mess with that I don't want you to mess with. Let's not do that, please. But essentially, here's your SSH. This is a really important server. You can see you got your key files here, RSA, DSA, etc., for doing your PIM files, basically your permission keys. They're kind of cool. Login grace time, strict modes, yes. Max authorization tries. You can change this from 6 to something else if you wanted, in case you happen to forget your passwords on a regular basis. It's great turning it up to a higher number. It's always fun. Here you can also have known hosts. We'll get into that in just a second. That one's important. And that's something you definitely want to pay attention to, because it's going to reappear to you on a final type test. So that will help you. There's a bunch of stuff in here. You really don't have to hardly change anything in this file for the most part. There's really not much you're going to need to touch. That's the great thing about the server. There's really just not much to do with it. It's pretty much as good to go from the get-go for the most part here. Alright. And there's only one other, well, okay, so there's your host key file, yeah. But besides that, we could also cat ssh_config instead of just the D on it. And you can see a little bit more here with some more configuration stuff. I don't need you to do anything with this, but if you wanted to, you could. And I'm just showing it to you to let you know where the configuration files are. If you ever need to modify them, this is where you go to do it. Let's see here. There's something I'm looking for particularly, but I'm not sure if it's in there. Yeah, it's not in here. Alright. Some stuff, gosh, I don't know. Some stuff is updated and it may not be the same anymore on the configuration. I've noticed some of the configuration has changed on SSH. Usually these configuration files don't hardly ever change much at all, if at all. Sometimes they'll stay the same for over a decade and they never change at all, literally. So once you learn it, you're pretty much good to go for the most part, right, for this stuff, which is great. It's a lot of work to learn it in the first place, but once you learn it, you don't have anything else to do after that, if that makes sense. So that's a really cool part about this. It sucks when you're first learning it, though. There's a way of actually setting up how many, what users can access it, and it's not listed in either one of these files. And previously, you could put it in there by saying user, allow users, and then you list the users spaced, whatever, in the configuration file, and it would only allow those certain users to log in through SSH and no others, essentially. However, it's not listed in either one of these. But anyways, that's where your configuration file is, and for SSH, and that's where you would set them. To show you on the client thing, now the trick here, typing in CD here. Let me first of all go back here. So let me just do a good SU space student, for instance. Change back over into student. Let me CD. Remember, just typing in CD and hitting enter takes you back to your home directory. So that's really useful. All right. Now if I do an ls-a here, remember that brings up all my hidden files. Check it out. There's a hidden folder in here. Why is it hidden? Because we don't want users messing with a bunch of the configuration files in their profiles. If they see it, they will mess with it. So we hide it from them so that they don't know about it. Okay, and that's the way we like it. We don't want them messing with this stuff, because if they mess with it, they'll make sure that their own login system no longer works and their program stopped working and all this fun stuff, because they decide to go in and start editing stuff that was required for their program and suddenly make it not work anymore. And then you get the fun task of fixing it. So in order to prevent them from doing that, we hide it from them, and most of them don't have enough knowledge to know where to find it and how to find it. So they just won't find it most of the time. And so that's why they're hidden. And that's what the dot in front of it means, is that it's hidden. So if I cd into .ssh here, I will see the file known host. And this is going to be on an exam, so you need to know this. Known host literally will list the different computers that connected with what servers it connected to through SSH, and it'll get stored in here for that user. And this is a good example. So notice this is the RSA. This is the password key. Remember I was talking about the password key to .pim file? There you go. That's it right there. So the great thing about this is if you're using a whole PIM key system or whatever, you can use this instead of typing in a password, and it's really secure, because good luck cracking that. You're going to be there a while trying to crack that one. You know what I mean? It's really complicated, and it's totally random. So yeah. Yeah, so yeah, they'll still be doing it like a century from now or longer, even with computer technology leaps. So it's pretty secure. I don't think you have to worry about it too much. All right. So there we are. Now, how do we actually use SSH from the standpoint of a client accessing the server? So say we're the network admin, right? And we're on our own our regular desktop, right? And we want to access the server running off of maybe in Virginia or something like that. Is this making sense? I want to access that. How do I do that? Let's look at how to do that. We're the client. We're connecting to the server. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? Now, in this case, I'm going to be connecting to us, because I'm going to network with ourselves here. Because technically, this SSH server is running on this computer right now, right? So, and since I have the client and the server, I can technically network with myself. I can have the client connect to my server without ever leaving this computer. Does that make sense? And considering the limited number of CPUs that we have for the cores, we only have 2 cores. We don't really have enough cores to run 3 operating systems at once, because we need a core per operating system. We only have 2. So that means when we run our virtual machine, we can't really run 2 versions of Linux simultaneously and network them together. That'd be great, but we don't have enough cores to do that. So we're going to network with ourselves, okay, throughout this course. There's really no difference between it other than trying to fight with firewalls. But I'm going to have you guys disable the firewall. Matter of fact, I already did it for you. It's already disabled. It's because when you guys are learning, the last thing I want is you guys run into trouble with firewalls. Firewalls make up 90-something% of people's problems when they're networking. Not kidding you. And the problem is that a port's not open somewhere. The ports are closed somewhere. It's not open, so you can't connect. That's the problem. And so if I have the firewalls on, without fail, I will have a whole bunch of students frustrated why they can't get their service to work, and it's always going to just about be a firewall. That or someone forgot their password and username, which is why I made everyone's username student and their password password. So you can't forget it. And if you do forget it, everyone else in the class can tell you what it is. So that's done on purpose. I got tired of that. That was the other 90-something% of the time why people couldn't network. They forgot their passwords because they're trying to network with each other, and then they wouldn't tell each other's username and passwords correctly, and it wouldn't get transmitted between the people, or they would forget them. That was even better. Forget them, and then people couldn't network together because of that. So between firewalls and usernames and passwords, I about went nuts. So I disabled the firewalls and I set up a standard password and username. So now all that's out of your way. Now it's just getting the servers to work and understanding them. Does that make sense to everybody? The other thing that's disabled is SE Linux. It's awesome. It is super tight on security. It's so tight that I figured it'd take you guys a whole daggone quarter in order to get it worked out for one server. It makes firewalls look tame. It is extremely secure. It is also an absolute nightmare to work through some of the, if you have that thing set to like super paranoid setting, basically. It takes a lot of work to work through all the possible conditions and going through them. And it's different for every single student in the class. So I go nuts. And trying to work through all that is like nearly impossible. And it'll drive you guys nuts too. So that's turned off also. So I want all that security layers. Normally you would have them on, okay, because you want it to be secure, right? But we have it turned off so you can learn, okay? So that's the whole reason behind it. It's not to not simulate reality, but rather to have you guys learn before you have to do reality, more or less. Make sense to everybody? Okay, cool. Alrighty. With all that said, let's do the SSH. So SSH, that's too many SSH. You literally just type SSH because you're about to connect to an SSH server. Make sense? And then you say your user. In this case, our user is student, right? And then I say at, and at this point, we're saying at what server. Now, if you're doing this across the internet, it would literally be like www.blablabla.com. Assuming that's a real website. I don't know if it is. But, you get the idea. It could be. Could be. Does that make sense? It could also be IP address. It could be IPv4, it could be IPv6, etc. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you could put either or there, literally. I could put 127.0.0.1. That'd be the same thing as localhost, right? Or if I wanted to do IPv6, I'd do : : 1, which is what loopback is in IPv6. So either way, I could say localhost here. I could say localhost.localdomain if I wanted to. That's also loopback. And it's all stored in our host file, which I'll pull up here in a second to help you guys get a better idea of that. Okay? This is where you set up your static IP address name for a server. If I say enter at this point, it's going to ask me for my password. My password is going to be password in this case. And I am now logged into my remote server, which happens to be this computer. But normally this would be a whole nother computer. Does that make sense? Now, whatever I type at this prompt is literally at the server. Make sense to everybody? I'll help prove it even better. Let me exit. I've now exited out of the server. I'm back in my client. Yeah, I typed in exit and hit enter. Yeah. So check this out. So if I do SSH, remember I did student earlier, but I could do root, which is the administrator. Is this making sense? At localhost. Now this is the typical thing. You'd actually go in as root most of the time because you want to be the administrator and make changes on the server, right? So this is actually quite common. Let's say root here, and again the password is going to be password for root. And I'm now in, and check it out. It says root local at localhost. I can run a pwd command on it, see where I'm at. I'm in root's home directory. Makes sense. It dropped me right into my home directory for my administrator. So now I'm on the server as the administrator. And anything I type in here would be as the administrator on that machine. Does this make sense to everybody? Sort of, kind of? So this is really cool. This lets you just, and I mean, it's this fast across the internet too, man. You're like talking 1 second or less, and you're in to a whole nother computer somewhere on the internet, assuming they have SSH server running somewhere, right? But if you're doing like an Amazon cloud server or whatever, they would have. And if you're setting this up at a company where you install SSH server like I just did, make sure you do that, okay? Because you want to be able to do this. You do not want to drive 2 hours back to work at the dead of night. Not to mention, they don't want you to. They want that server up like this because it's money, man. That server's down. They're losing money. It could be millions of dollars in a matter of a couple hours. Think about it. Some of these companies literally can run a couple $1 million through their accounts in just a matter of an hour because they have that much business hitting them. And if their server's down, if their website's down, they're losing a lot of money. So they want that thing up in 2 minutes or less, pretty much. So driving a couple hours back to the office to get that server up is really going to be a problem. And you got to drive back too. Go back to sleep. It sucks. So don't do that. Do this instead. This is the same logical thing to do. And it's secure, so you don't have to worry about it. And once I'm done doing whatever I need to do over here, I just type in exit, and I'm now back out of the server and back at my client machine. Back at this computer again. Does that make sense? That's all there is to it. It's that simple. It's pretty cool. Alright, any questions on that, or? No? Alright, let's go ahead and do the FTP server. Alright, so this is VSFTP, VSFTPD, and what this means is very secure file transfer protocol daemon. What does all that mean? Well, it's a very secure file uploading, downloading server, right? It's for uploading and downloading files, and the daemon means that this is a server. Okay, so this is actually the most secure FTP server there is. This has more security features than any of the others. As a matter of fact, this is the FTP server you want to install. I can tell you about all kinds of other companies who installed other FTP servers that got hacked. Don't use other FTP servers. Use VSFTPD. It's the one in your book, and it actually is the best one to use. And I'm going to go over the configuration file, and you will need to set it up for this. Okay, so we do need to go over this in detail, and you do need to set it up because it is part of your lab. Alright, so FTP is actually quite easy on this. You're just going to do a yum install like this, and you're going to type in VSFTPD like that. Then type it, hit enter, and it'll install. Cool. It's also in your book too. It's like around chapter 18 or something. Assuming it hasn't changed in the 6th edition. So once you have that installed, can anybody tell me what I do now? We just did it for SSH. What am I going to do for FTP? Yeah, turn it on. How am I going to turn it on? CHK config, yep, space, and then yeah, VS FTPD like that. Then space on. Exactly. And it always helps if you're root. Same thing again. My gosh, I do that all the time. I'm too lazy to type that, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just select that and middle click. It lets me copy and paste what I had in there. Yeah, I could have done up arrow. You're correct. Could have done that too. Been doing up arrow a lot. I just like to show off several ways you can do this, make your life easier. I always like having you guys work the lazy man's method as much as possible. Or we can call it efficiency if you like. I always like to call it laziness, but it's really efficiency. It depends on how you want to look at it, you know. And then we need to start that service, so we're going to say /sbin/service, and then again it's going to be vsftpd space start, and now start it. Now vsftpd will throw you off on this. It says failed, and you're like, oh my gosh, it didn't start. It didn't start because it was already running. So yes, it failed to start because it already ran. So this will really mess with you. So if you're worried about that, you can say restart instead, and if it's running, it automatically shuts it down and then starts it up. Yeah, I already installed this thing previously, so that's why. In your case, it won't be already installed, so it'll be new for you guys. But in my case, I had already installed it and it was already running. So if you see failed like that, it didn't fail to start. It was already running. This is the only server I can think of that does this. It's really annoying. So if it messes with you, type in restart instead of start, because that way if it's already running, it'll shut it down and start it back up again. Does that make sense? Now, the cool part about this restart is, now you're used to having to restart the computer on Windows, right? And it takes a while to shut down and come all the way back up. So you're down quite a bit of time there for that. The reason why some of these servers are able to get 99.999% uptime is because you saw what the uptime on that was. Part of a second. It was shut down and back up in part of a second. Literally. It was that quick, right? So it's really, really fast. So this is a great way to, after you make changes to a server, start it back up again without wasting any time. And you don't have to type in stop and then type in the command to start it again. You just type in restart and it does it for you. It does the stop and start as fast as possibly could be done, basically. Alright, so at this point we have an FTP server running and we can actually run FTP commands to it. So let's look at FTP commands. Now I already have installed for you guys, and on the Red Hat edition I will have FileZilla. Unfortunately on CentOS we can't install FileZilla because it doesn't have FileZilla for CentOS. Even though FileZilla runs on just about every other distribution of Linux, CentOS apparently doesn't have the ability to have FileZilla. That said, here we are. Now I can connect. Here is my client side, here's my server side. Here is where I type in my server. In this case, it'd be localhost because that would be our server on this computer. Does that make sense to everybody? Remember, localhost is loop back. We just set up the FTP server. Port would be port 21. It defaults to port 21, so we don't even have to put it. But if you want to, you can type in port 21. I can say what user it is. I could be root, for instance. I can move files from the student to the root account here, etc. Whatever. It depends on whatever account you want. Matter of fact, let me just point that out. This will help bring the point home. And then I type in password for my password. And it connects. Or it should. Awesome. Always love to be proven wrong, especially on video. Alright. Try doing it here. Alright, so it doesn't want me to jump. Alright, whatever. Daggone it. Yeah. I didn't have permission to go to root. I need to be root to do that one. Didn't have permission. But anyways, the really great thing about this is it's graphical. So say I wanted to copy all the files from a certain directory like downloads. I could literally select it and then say here, and it would transfer it from the client to the server. All the files in that folder plus the folder. Does that make sense? If I want to download files from the server to the client, it's literally just, oh, I don't know, just select one of them, like this one for instance, and then click this arrow, and it will download all the files from the server to all those files from the server to the client. Well, downloading is transferring. It copies, right? You're not moving them. Yes, you're not moving files. You are copying them. Yes, correct. Does this make sense to everybody? Now, we need to do some things in the configuration file to make sure we can upload all the files we want with the right permissions and all that stuff. So we're going to go over that in just a second, okay? It's really important, matter of fact. Right now, it's not set up the way we want. Actually, it is on mine because I've already done it. But on you guys, it won't be, okay? So we'll go over that in just a second. But this is the graphical way to do it. And this is how you're going to do it almost always. Because almost always, your client machine is going to be graphical unless you're just crazy. You just want to run in command line all the time. I don't recommend doing that. I don't know why you would do that. That's crazy. It's not going to hurt anything for you to have a graphical interface for your client machine. Your client machine can just hook up to your servers just fine, and then you can go command line if you need to on the server. That's fine. But on the client side, it makes a lot of sense to have a graphical interface. You could, first of all, you can have more terminals on the on the graphical version than you can on the command line. Yes, you can have multiple terminals on the command line too, but not as many. Just saying. It's just easier to have access to both graphical and non-graphical as opposed to only non-graphical. It just means you can get things done faster at times. You'll see what I'm talking about in just a second. Okay. I can do the exact same thing command line, only type a lot more. In this case, the graphical is more efficient than the non-graphical. There's other times where the non-graphical is more efficient than the graphical. That is not the case in this scenario. Okay. So in this scenario, you just about always in the real world want to use a graphical client to connect to do your FTP. Just saying. But here's the command line way to do it too if you need to use it. There are some cases where you just don't have access to one for graphical because you can't install programs because you're not allowed to, but you need to FTP something. So then you can use command line to do it and it works. So that's the way to get around it. And just about every machine already has FTP client already installed on it, so you can get away with doing this. Really great for a Mac without having to go spend extra money for the FTP program, like spend like $50 or $100 for a graphical FTP program. You can just FTP for free right in the command line because it's already there. It's kind of dirty that they do that, but anyways, you just download files that you don't have to pay anything at all. But anyways, essentially, let's look at how to do that. So I would literally type in FTP. Now, if I was going to do secure FTP, it would be SFTP. Okay, but we're not going to do that right now. We're going to do FTP. FTP, space like that. And then we're going to say what our server is. In this case, our server is going to be localhost. All right. And then it asks me my name. In this case, I'm going to be student. And the password is going to be password. And now I have an FTP prompt because I am now successfully logged in. This is making sense? Alright, now I can type ls. Now this does not give you full access to every command you can think of like SSH does. It doesn't. It has a limited command set. And you can limit them even more in your VSFTPD configuration file. Let them decide what ones they can run and what they can't run for commands. You can limit them to a particular directory if you wanted to even. It's very powerful. Alright, but say I want to transfer a file. I could take a file in here, like for instance I could go into downloads. Hopefully there are files in downloads. Yeah, there's a few of them. Oh, I don't know, maybe you want to transfer webmin or whatever. I could say put, in this case, webmin, like this. And then that would upload the file. Does that make sense? Put's going to upload. Notice I cannot use my arrow keys. It does weird stuff when you do. See that? Don't do that. Yeah, it's not going to know blah, 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 blah. I agree. If I wanted to get that file, I would literally type get space and then the name of the file I wanted to download, and that would download a file. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, yeah. And here's how you upload and download multiple files. You say input for M for multiple put, upload multiple files, right? And then you literally start listing each and every freaking file one by one with spaces in between. It's a lot of fun. It's it's what you want to do on every weekend on a rainy day. Just come in through here and just literally list each file that you want to upload one by one. What happens if you have 1,000 files? You're going to be typing a lot, man. So this is why I said the graphical is a whole lot cooler. For reasons, yes, it's mget for downloading, correct? And then again, you would list multiple files for it too. And so this is a good example of where you want to learn about the whole copy and paste by selecting it here. So you just select what it is you want to copy and you middle click on your mouse to copy. I can also do Shift Control C and then Shift Control V. If you say Control C and Control V, it doesn't work. Because Control C is how you kill a program. So don't do that because you'll kill literally the program you're running, and that's not going to work out well for you. Okay, so yeah, so it needs to be Shift Control C and then Shift Control V if you're going to copy and paste by using hotkeys. Of course, I just like selecting stuff and middle clicking because it's easy and fast. And it works. Works really good in terminal. Is this making sense? Alright, in this case, no, I don't want to download either one. Alright, when I'm done doing all my stuff that I need to do, I just type in quit, I think it is, instead of exit for FTP. Yeah, it's quit. It's either two commands typically if you need to exit or quit something. It's either going to be exit or quit. So if you get one wrong, try the other one, and it'll probably let you exit out of that program or quit out of that program, however you want to put it. Does that make sense to everybody? Exit's the most common one of the two. Quit's mostly just for FTP. If I happen to remember off the top of my head, that's quit for that one. Alright, so that's client side doing your FTP. Now let's actually go in and modify that configuration file on the server side FTP. And let's configure it so that way we have everybody accessing what they need to access and nothing that they don't need to access. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay, cool. Let's hop to it. All right, so if I ls in, if I cd into /etc and then there's vs ftpd, that's the folder, like so. And I ls into that, we can see here a whole listing of things. We have a user list, we have FTP users, but the file we're really interested in here is vsftpd.conf. And that file is the one we want to do VI on. And here we are. Okay. Everything with a pound sign in front of it does not count. It's a comment. If it's a comment, it's not seen by the program. That's important because that means it lets you turn on and off features without having to delete them. And so if you need to come back later on and turn them on, it's just a matter of deleting a pound sign in front of it. If you want to take away a feature, it's nothing more than just adding a pound sign in front of it and then saving. Is this making sense? So that's an easy way of handling it. And no, there's no graphical tool for configuring this. So yes, you do have to do it by command. You have to go in here and hand edit these files for configuration. Same thing for SSH. So forget about graphical tool for these two servers. They have to be done by command line, like this. You could also use gedit running through root privileged or whatever. You could do it that way too. But I'm showing you this way because this is how you're going to be handling it most of the time through SSH through a remote server. It's through VI like this. Does that make sense? So a lot of times gedit's not an option because it's probably going to be running in run level 3, which means it's running in non-graphical mode and therefore you cannot launch graphical programs. And you don't want to. The reason why is because you're going to have to stream basically high definition video from the server to your client just so you can edit something graphically. Same thing goes for Windows. Realize if you're going in through VNC or virtual network computing, basically a graphical way of doing your network administration, you are basically streaming high def video the whole time from that server. It has to with your point and click interactions. It's kind of bad, especially when you're doing a web server, which is what FTP is going to be used with a lot with. Is going to be your Apache servers and things of that nature, your web servers, right? So that server is about to go down, and you need to make some changes, however, to help prevent that from happening. And you access it graphically, where it has to do this heavy computation to do this massive high def streaming. You could literally take down the server in your effort to stop it from going down. Does that make sense to everybody? So be able to go in through command line where it's ridiculously light to the point where it's like part of a percent of the computations. It's so light on it. I mean, we're probably talking below 0.1. It's like probably 0.01 computation percentage. I mean, it's just like practically nothing on the radar. To like maybe like, I don't know, 50% or 25% of the server computation to handle your high def video streaming for you to access that server and do a configuration change on it. So yeah, don't do that. Definitely do it through command line for that. Alright, so this is really important on the configuration. Alright, so let me ask you these questions. They're actually common sense if you think about it, but you have to think about it for it to become common sense, otherwise it's not going to be. Alright, do we want anonymous, let anyone and everyone, including Billie Jean and Joe, for accessing our server? No, we don't want Tom, Dick, and Harry accessing our server, even if they are from Third Rock from the Sun. So we basically want to have this set to no. That's their name, Tom, Dick, and Harry. Alright. Do we want to be able to allow local users to log in? Yeah, we do. Do we want to be able to, now this is something to think about, this is going to throw you off. Do we want to be able to have write enabled on our FTP? Can anyone tell me why you might want write enabled or don't want write enabled? You do want it, I agree with you. It's not so much that. Realize that writing is uploading files and downloading is reading files. Think about that. The action of literally downloading is you're reading that file to copy it, right? So if you have read permission, that means someone can download that file because they have the ability to read that file, which means it can be read to be copied to the client. In order to upload a file, you are technically writing a file. You are transferring the data from the client and you are now writing it onto the server. So if you don't give it write enabled, they can't upload files. Yeah, I did, but this is a good rehash of that. So there are times you want FTP servers where they can only download and not upload. For instance, you see them all the time on the internet where they have download servers for people to download from, and you don't want anyone uploading to them. Most of the time, though, when you're having web servers that people have web pages on, you want them to be able to upload their web pages and content for their web page, for instance. Otherwise, the web page will never make it onto the server. Does that make sense? So, yes, we want to make it write enabled. Otherwise, now in the past I have made it on some students to be not write enabled because they were overwriting some of my files on purpose. So I made it to where they could only download, and there's a good example of why you might want to set that to no. Alright, default UMask for local users is 077. Alright, so let's talk about this. So this is our local UMask. Now this goes into a bit of discussion that we went over last quarter, but I go over it in this class every single time, and for good reason. Alright, let me make this a little bigger here for you guys so you can see this really well, and also see it really well in the video too. Alright, let's go over fonts and colors, change this from mono 14 to maybe like an 18 so it like really stands out. Alright, cool. Alright, what is 1 for our permissions, guys? Can anybody tell me? Execute, yeah. Taking out the criminals. Alright, so here we have, what's 2 going to be? It's a terrible joke. Alright. What's 2 going to be for permissions? It's going to be write. It's not read, it's write. And what's 4? It's read. Yeah, it's the only one left, right? Everybody should get that one. So did I forget one? Because I skipped 3, didn't I? Why is that? Anyone tell me? No one knows. They don't remember. Alright. Now the great thing about this is you only have to remember 3 numbers. Yeah, I know there's charts you can memorize and all this stuff. I don't do that. I like to memorize as little as possible. I like to do just basic mathematics like add, multiply, divide, subtract. It makes life so much easier. And that's what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to add. So if I say 1 plus 2, that'd be execute write. That gives me 3. Ta-da. If I want 5, I do 1 plus 4 is 5, which is read execute. If I want to read, write, and execute, that'd be 1 plus 2 plus 4 is 7. Making sense? This way you don't have to memorize 8 or so numbers for user, for group, and for everyone. Instead, you just remember 3 numbers. And now you know it all. Literally. Alright, so for users, what would my permission want to be? What would I want those permissions to be? Read, I agree. You want read. So we need 4. Anything else besides reading? I agree. We need to write too. And believe it or not, you also have to execute for some wild reason. You do. So this needs to be a 7 for the user. For the group, this is up to debate for group, basically. Read, write, and execute if you want to do the read and write part. I would for group. Some people don't. They want only user to have this ability. So it'd be 4 plus 2 plus 1 equals 7. Of course, you just did that calculation, so obviously you know it's 7. But alright, and then for everyone else who doesn't have a user and basically anonymous, what I want for their permissions? No, I don't want them accessing the daggone thing at all. I'm going to give them 0. I'm going to goose egg. I don't want them to be able to read. I don't want them to be able to download my files if I don't know them. Yeah, so it'd be 770, right? And that's what it is for our standard permissions, but it asked us for UMask. Now, UMask is special for servers, and it's used on servers all the time. This is like anti-permissions. It's the opposite. It's like opposite day. It's the opposite of whatever number it would be for permissions, but that's what it is for UMask. So, the easy way to do this, because you could memorize a whole nother chart and an adding system or just a whole nother chart system for UMask, but again, so the rescue is basic mathematics, and I like it. So, if I say 777, which is the full permissions, and then I say whatever permissions it would be normally, for my permissions, I get umask. Yeah. So for umask, 0 means read, write, and execute, and 7 means no permissions at all. It's literally the opposite. So if I subtract 777 from whatever permissions I would have normally, it gives me my umask permissions. Does this make sense? That's pretty simple, huh? Now, what happens if you want to go from umask back to chmod permissions? How do you handle that? Well, guess what? Ends up being 777 again, because we're just inversing again. So because we're inversing it, what is that going to give you guys? 770. Ta-da! So that's how we can go from regular permissions to umask and from umask to regular permissions. It's the exact same algorithm, both times. You just plug in whatever permissions you want for which system, and it converts it to the other system. So just basically remember 777 minus whatever your permissions are, and it converts it to the other system. That's it. It's that simple. So what do we want for our permissions then for our umask? 007. You got it. Oh, look at there, it's 007. Well, you know. Making sense? What would 022 be? Don't worry, we don't have to figure it out. That's what the math's for, right? Yeah, 022. Yeah. So this is going to be 755. What would that be? This is what they were suggesting. Users have read, write, and execute. Right. Group has read and execute. No, it's read and execute. Yep. Right. I don't like that. I like anonymous people downloading my personal files. So I don't like their suggestion. That's why you need to understand this stuff. It's not just magic numbers. You need to know what stuff is. Make sense, everybody? So that let me translate what they were suggesting into seeing, do I want to do that or not? And I'm like, no. Does that make sense to everybody? I don't know why. I will never understand that myself. Right. I have no idea what umask is for. I'm sorry, I don't. I know we use it all the time on the servers instead of using chmod, but I have no idea why. I've been using it for years and I have no clue why we use it instead. Been using it for over a decade and I have no idea why I use it. I mean, I know I need to, but I don't know what it's for. Why we're using it instead of regular permissions. I don't know the difference on it. Other than that technically it's the inverse, but I don't know why it matters and why they can't just inverse it inside the program. Alright, so a couple other things we need to say. Now, the great thing here is if you don't remember what something is, they got comments to tell you what it is. So it's not like, oh no, I don't know what to do. It's going to tell you, which is great. And so is my video. Alright, so here we have anon, which is anonymous, upload enabled. Do we want anonymous people uploading files to our server? No. So if it's the default value for this is no. If I want, I could come in here and uncomment this and set it to no. But if I don't want to do that, if I just leave it uncommented, it's the same thing as typing in no in here. Does that make sense? Right. Right. And you need to screenshot all these changes you make. I don't necessarily need the screenshots of every little part of a configuration file. I do need the screenshots of what you changed, though, if that makes sense. I'll show you guys how to do it. Actually, how do you do a screenshot? You hit print screen. That's it. That's how you do a screenshot. Huh? Yes. You change this here. You change this here. Well, you don't have to change this particular one here, but you do have to change this one here because they do 022. Now, mine's already set up correctly, but yours won't be. Write enabled, I don't think it's set to yes. I think it's set to no. Anonymous is set to yes, which I think you definitely want to set that to no. So, I mean, yes, you change some things. Also, do you want anonymous people to be able to make make folders on your server? No. So again, that one's also going to be a no. Again, by default, it is no. But if you want to, you can uncomment it like this and set it to no. It's up to you. You can leave it commented out. Either way, it's going to be fine. I just know off the top of my head that that is by default no. If you don't know that's what it is, put a no. And it makes you feel more comfortable with it because then it's straightforward what it is. Activate directory messages. Messages given to remote users when they go into a certain directory. And yes, we have it enabled so that they can get information about where they're going and what they're doing. X for log enabled. Yes, we're going to log people going onto the FTP server and not, etc. So yes, we're going to log their actions and what they're doing. Connect from port 20 equals yes. Yeah, you need that for FTPing. So yeah, unless you're wanting to do hardcore SSH, basically SFTP only, and then you could disable, the other ports other than port 22 for doing FTP. So that would be a reason to do that if you want to get hardcore about it. In the case of Amazon, it is disabled. The only thing you can do is SFTP for Amazon. So they are hardcore about it, and 20 is disabled on Amazon. So if you want to get hardcore about it, that's how you do that. That's how you disable that port. Yes, sir. Not yet. I need to get through this rest of the way, and then you can have your break. All right. We have ch own uploads, where you change the owner of the uploads. If you say yes to this, I'm not requiring you guys to do this, but if you do, you could have like a special user on the system called FTP user or something like that, right? Then when people upload it, it becomes FTP user, and if everybody's part of group FTP user, that means that everybody can access those uploaded files and download those files. Does that make sense to everybody? Thus, by changing the ownership of every file that gets uploaded, then everyone gets access to those files instead of individuals. I'm not wanting to set it up that way, but if you want to set it up that way or whatever, that's how you do it. And then you would say, instead of whoever here, you say like FTP user. And then FTP user would end up owning all the files instead of individual users with their permissions. Does that make sense, everybody? Cool. The name of log file when XFL file is logged. STD format, yes. Warning changes, blah, blah, blah. This is location of the log file. Don't change it, please. Leave it as is. This is how you can change it if you need to, but there it is. But don't do it, please. You're not changing it, yeah, so leave it alone. Yeah. Alright, we're going to leave all that stuff alone. Standard format, yes, it's fine. Don't do anything. Idle session timeout, 600 is fine. Just leave it alone. Leave it commented out. Data connection timeout, 120, it's fine. Unless you get into performance issues, you don't time this. Change these. This is where you tweak it for tweaking performance. Does that make sense? So say you got a really bad connection, you might want to increase your timeout so people have a longer time before it gets timed out type thing. If you have a really solid connection and that's not an issue, and connections are being left too long, you have a lot of high data traffic in there, then it makes sense to lower that time. But I mean, you would have to have an issue where you have some kind of performance issue where you need to go in and change that stuff. You know what I mean? Data connection is 120 here. It's just leave it alone. It's commented out. It's fine. No privilege user equals FTP secure. You can set that up if you want. Leave it uncommented. It's fine for now. Async abort. Hold on a second. Mangling ASCII. Yes. Alright. ASCII uploads. Alright. These need to be uncommented and set to yes. It is a horrible feature of a protocol, but it is how you're going to upload text files. And text files would be any code file, like for instance HTML or web page development code, which basically means a web page. And since the majority of your clients are going to be web page developers, it's a pretty good idea in order to let them upload their web pages to the server. Because if you don't set that to yes, they can't. They can upload their images and their videos. They just can't upload the web page code that actually makes the web page. So it's a really good idea to set that up to yes. You need to be able to handle ASCII and binary. By default binary, but binary is going to be things like images, videos, executable programs such as Flash, etc. Could be Java, could be Python, etc. Python is typically not compiled though, so most likely it'll be ASCII on it too. So, well, pre-compiled. It's interpreter-based language. It can be compiled, but rarely ever is. It doesn't gain you much in performance. It just lets it start a little faster, and that's about it. So it doesn't really gain you much performance at all. Right here is where you can set your FTP banner. So when they first come onto the FTP server, it gives them a message of whatever you're wanting to say. I just said instructor server FTP for the heck of it. Please don't put instructor. You're not the instructor. Put whatever you want to put without cursing or profanity or whatever else. No sexual anything in there, please. Banned email file here. Leave that alone. It's fine. This is where you'd list it if you wanted to. chroot, this gets into chroot jail. I'm not going to get into that today. Essentially, what it does is let you set up a false file system to where when someone is trying to hack into the computer, they think they're hacking into it, and they're not. They're actually hacking into false files, fake files. And to them, it appears like the right directory and the real directory and everything, and in all actuality, it's a false directory hidden inside the real one. So it has the exact same directory structure and everything, and you can even put fake files in there. And they think they're changing the settings and everything on it, and they think they've hacked your server, and they haven't hacked anything but fake files. So it's great. It really throws them off. chroot, yeah. chroot jail. It doesn't say jail in there, but jail is kind of the idea of like locking them into a false directory structure. That's why it's called jail. It doesn't say jail on there. That's what it's called. Does that make sense to everybody how that works? We're not doing it, but that's how it works. Cool? Alright, awesome. Alright. Yeah, this is where you could do that kind of stuff. Okay, yeah, and this is really important. ls underscore recurse underscore enable equals yes. Alright, we don't want under any daggone conditions to ever have that set to yes. That should always be set to no. By default, it is no. With it commented out like this, it is no. If you want, you can come in here and delete that yes and set it to no. By the way, these no's and yeses have to be all caps. You cannot do a lowercase or one letter larger than the other. It has to be all caps, just like I'm typing it exactly. Anything other than what I'm typing will not work. Okay, just FYI. Anyways, this is really important because recursive ls. Let's have a look at that real quick. Let me launch another terminal. Let me give you an example of that. Only much larger so you can actually see it. Alright, if I do ls space -r like this, it lists every file and every folder inside of that directory, inside of those directories, and so on and so forth until it goes through all of them. And you can see it takes a little while just to do the students directory alone. Now imagine if you did this at the /root directory and then ran it about 1,000,000 times. What's going to happen? You'll crash the server. Yeah. So you do not allow the users to do that. Because if you do, you just open yourself to an attack where they can crash your server. Does that make sense? So I said the configuration file matters, and this is the most secure one there is for FTP servers. So I don't think the others even protect against this. I'm pretty sure you can crash any of the FTP servers with this command on any of the other FTP servers. So it's just, I mean, make sure you use this server and make sure that thing is set to no, because otherwise you just open the door to anyone who knows about that can crash your server. Now you can only be IPv4 or IPv6. If I say listen, listen means IPv4. If I say listen IPv6 equals yes, then that means that it'll listen for IPv6 instead of IPv4 IP addresses. And when we're saying listen, we mean that the server is looking for clients connecting with IPv4 addresses versus IPv6 addresses. Does that make sense? So if I have one set, you'll notice this commented out. By default, this is no. If I want to set this to IPv6, I would literally come up here to listen. I would set it to no. I'd uncomment this one here and have it set to yes. Does that make sense to everybody? That's how you switch it. But one has to be no and the other one has to be yes. You cannot have them both be yes. It will not work. Okay? Yeah, well that's fine for in this case. But yeah. PAM, haven't gotten into this. PAM is a centralized service to where you could have information stored in it that goes across all the servers, so that way you can update centralized information in one place and have it update for all the servers that use PAM. It's great in theory, but oftentimes I just find myself going in and editing all the servers. For some people, they really like it, but you have to remember exactly what things go to what servers if you're using PAM to do that, and be aware of what it is it's getting sent to each one. Otherwise, you're going to step into you'll misstep on a server. You'll think you have something changed when it's not actually changed, because it doesn't have all the information you need to change for that server. PAM can't cover everything because each server is different. Although they do share some information, it's very little that they share type thing. So yeah, it's a nice idea, but I just user list enabled equals yes. Yeah, absolutely. And TCP Wrappers is a security feature. What this lets you do is do like host.deny and host.allow files inside the etc folder. This lets you block individual IP addresses or ranges of IP addresses, where you can stop full access for different types of protocols. So it could be HTTP, it could be FTP, it could be SSH, you name it. You can literally just block entire groups of computers that way. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's what TCP wrappers are, and that's how you do it. After you're done with that, of course, just hit the escape key, Shift Z, Z is in Zachary, twice while holding down Shift, and it lets it save the file. Ta-da! Now, are these changes taking effect on the FTP server? Does anybody know? Did those changes I just made actually take effect? Yes, we have to restart the server. That's correct. The changes are sitting on the computer, but the server reads them in when it starts up for the configurations. So if you make any changes to your configuration, you must restart your server for all the servers out there, for all different types of servers, except for NFS. We'll get into that next week. NFS is the only server where you can actually live edit the configuration files, and you don't have to restart the server. It's the only one. All the others have to be restarted. So yes, this one has to be restarted. So the way we do that, can anybody talk me through it? What do I do? I am root, yeah. /sbin/service, very good. vsftpd, yeah, space, and then restart. There's our restart. Bam, there we are. Now those changes I made to my configuration file are live. Make sense? I want to show you 3 more files that will go really quick, about probably 5 minutes or less to show you this, and then we're done. Alright, so I'm going to cd into etc here really quick, and I'm going to cat the hosts file. Check it out. This is the file that you edit, where you can set the name to an IP address for a static IP address lookup on your server computer. In this case, loopback is 127.0.0.1, and it's set to localhost.localdomain and to localhost. For the IPv6 one, it is literally : :1 for loopback for IPv6. That is loopback for IPv6, and it's set to localhost6.localdomain6, and in space, another name you could use is localhost6. I'll prove it. If I ping host, ta-da! See that? Comes up with 127.0.0.1. That's loopback. Right? If I do ping localhost 6, well, it's not listening for it, so it's not doing squat. Yeah. But does everybody know what loopback is? No, not everybody does. Okay, so loopback is your way of accessing your internal networking system. Literally every operation you do on the computer, even copying and moving files, is a network operation. In the case of loopback, you're actually pointing back to your own computer. This is the internal IP address for every operating system, for every computer, that points to itself. So when you're moving a file, you're literally saying, I want to move from this computer's location to this computer's location. And when you're saying yourself, with loopback, it's happening underneath the hood. You don't even know what's happening, but that's what's going on. It lets you move a file from here, from this folder location to this other folder location on the same computer. Does that make sense? So when I'm saying localhost, I'm literally networking with myself because I'm networking loopback. Good proof of this. A little happy story I like to tell. It's true. It's not made up. This network admin, she was setting up her security on her server. And I might have told this one, I'm not sure, to some of you guys. But she was setting it up, and she went into a hacker's chat room and told them, I just set up my security, and none of you can break into it. And they said, oh yeah? Give me your IP address. So she told them 127.0.0.1. Now, you may not realize this, but most hackers are not that intelligent, actually. They just use other people's script and tools in order to break into computers. They really don't know how stuff really works, for the most part. So they all sent attacks at 127.0.0.1. And one after another, they started dropping off the chat room as they destroyed their own computers, until she was the only one left in the chat room. She wiped out the entire chat room. They all got what they deserved. True story. I love it. If they're not smart enough to know what loopback is, then they have no business trying to hack in her server. So, anyways, I thought it was awesome. I hate hackers, so anytime we get a chance to, host.allow. Let me show you this one. There's probably nothing in this file, but it's host.allow. Not hostess, no. Maybe it is host.allow. Yeah, it is. It's host.allow. All right. So, and then here you would literally could have something in there. Right now, I have nothing because I don't need it in there. But I could have something like HTTP like this, and then like I don't know, 172.1, 98.1 dot like that, and then whatever additional IP addresses would be, that whole range from, yeah, less octet, yeah. So literally that would be 0 through 255, but we won't say 0 and 255 because we're talking about broadcasting addresses at that point. So literally it'd be like what? It'd be 0 to 254, realistically. Well, probably not the 0 because you always drop those two numbers. So yeah, or whatever. Yeah. Anyhow, so if you just do the dot there, that'd be the extension. If I want to get a bigger range, I do that there. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, that works. Okay, so there anyways. So that allows, you can say which computers you want to allow that way. And then the other one, its nemesis, deny, does the opposite. And whatever ones you list in there, it blocks them from having access to the services. Does that make sense? Thought I'd point this out to you. This is also on your exam. So host.deny and host.allow on your TCP wrappers is on your final exam. So you need to pay attention to that also. So yeah, a number of things I'm talking about today will be on week 11 on your final exam. Any questions on any of this? Too much information for you to begin to remember, right? Awesome, that's what the video is for. Okay, so with that said and done, we can just stop.